Now, from Greater Sandton and beyond, get ready for the Sandton Times Hour with your host, Alexander.
Ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond, this is the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and always available on all good podcast platforms. I'm Alexander Leibner, and this is part of a two-part special edition of the Sandton Times Hour. If you've heard the first part, well, this is part two. And if you would like to send through your questions, your comments, or feedback, you can do so by emailing editor@sandtontimes.co.za, connecting on social media @Sandton Times, and visiting the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. And if you're listening live on Mix 93.8 and not at some later stage on the podcast, well, the WhatsApp line is open and you can use that on 0848220938. That's 0848220938. And it's always so good to hear from you. Wherever you're listening, a special welcome to you if it's in Johannesburg or Pretoria, or if it's somewhere else in the world, or if it's even somewhere else in South Africa. It might be online, it might be on air, it could be anywhere, quite frankly, but I'm happy to report that all is well in Sandton land. And once again, it's great to have Vincenzo with me behind the mixing desk as we go into another edition of a show that has taken us weeks to pull together to get all those familiar faces that had us glued to our TV sets and entertained us for so many hours in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Yes, they are the game show masters, and they had us glued with big cash prizes, catchphrases, and of course we were all screaming out the answers long before the contestants on the shows even knew what those answers were going to be. I'm not going to give away too much again for this hour, as I'd love you to take a stroll down memory lane, so stay listening and find out what has happened to those familiar faces and all those familiar names. Let's not waste any time as we get this week going with a bit of music right here on the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8.
The best of talk and music in 1 hour. This is the Sandton Times Hour.
This is the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 with Belters Only and My Mind. Well, my first guest for this week is a game show master. He was born in Johannesburg. He's an author and a seasoned media personality. He joins me in the hot seat, Jeremy Maggs. Let's chat about Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Alex, that was a long time ago, and I am casting my mind back almost 20 years to one of the most exciting times in my life. But thank you very much. I'm all yours.
Well, Jeremy, let me tell you, I think it must have been one of the most envious media jobs to have. I mean, when it comes to presenting a television show, I mean, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire must be right up there.
There's absolutely no doubt about it. You know, I think, Alex, as I say, with the caveat that it was a long time ago, and I'm incredibly flattered that people actually still remember it. At the time, it really was groundbreaking television. We hadn't had a quiz on South African television for a long time, and believe me, before I came along, there were some excellent quiz shows, but they seemed to have, at the time, had fallen into some state of disrepair. People weren't doing them anymore. This was a British concept. It was a franchise concept that was acquired by a company called Videovision, Anand Singh, who went on to produce the movie Long Walk to Freedom. And he saw the potential in a program like this. A couple of weeks later, after he'd signed them the deal, there's a whole process about how I got the job, which I can tell you if you want to know about it. The show started, a couple of weeks of intense rehearsal, and the next minute I had transformed from a frontline radio and television journalist into a quizmaster. I still find it quite odd, to be honest with you, that the change happened in my life so quickly, but my goodness me, what fun we had.
Well, let me tell you, we're talking about the period 99, so 1999 to 2005. I think you had about 100 episodes, which I couldn't actually quite believe that it ended up being 100 episodes. But yes, do tell me, how did you end up getting this job?
So, Alex, you're right. It was just on 100 episodes, maybe one or two more. So I had just come off a stint on television. I'd gone into breakfast television. It was a program called AM Today. I was hosting it at the time with guys like Martin Bailie and Alex J and Alan Khan, people who are, real luminaries in radio and television in South Africa. I'd come off the show. It was a year's contract, and I was really looking for something to do. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool journalist, Alex. That's what I studied. That's what I was, a newspaper journalist, a radio journalist, and got a call from Anand Singh. He said to me, listen, I've just acquired the rights to this thing. Would you be interested? And I drew myself up, Alex, to my full height, and I said to him, Anand Singh, absolutely not. I'm a journalist. I'm not going to stoop to becoming a game show host. And he said, listen, and this kind of dates me. He said, I'm going to send you the video cassette of the British show. And I said, Anand, thank you very much. Do that. I'm so embarrassed that I was so arrogant at the time. We've subsequently spoken about it on many occasions, and he finds it funny. And I promptly got the video cassette. My wife and I went on a holiday overseas. We came back, and I looked at this thing on our hall table, this package, and I said to my wife, well, I better have a look and see what it's like. Alex, I put this into the VCR. You're probably far too young to remember what a VCR is. Looked at this, and within, let me exaggerate because it's what I do best. Within 30 seconds, I knew absolutely that I wanted to do this more than anything else. I phoned him up and I groveled, and then, Alex, I groveled a little bit more. And when I'd finished groveling, you know what I did? I groveled some more, and I said, please, I've made a terrible mistake. I really wanted to do the show. He burst out laughing, and he said, I think the reason I think was why I got it is that there was a kind of, you had to have a kind of basic understanding of current affairs, but you also had to have a kind of a quizzical look about you, which apparently I have. My wife calls it a look of deep cynicism and sarcasm. She might be right. But that's how I got the gig. And as you say, just over 100 episodes later, I really do think, if I may say so modestly, it's a little part of South African television history.
Absolutely. And I think that's also the reason why we're chatting. I mean, I used to love watching it. And actually, at one point, I was actually trying to figure out why it didn't carry on beyond 2005. Because I know a lot of the international formats have been going on for years, if not decades. And they're still going to this day.
You know, Alex, one of the things that I've learned in a long career in radio and television is never get involved in the politics of programming negotiation. I think that's a polite way of putting it. My understanding was twofold. One is I think audiences were starting to wane, and I think that they made the right call. Is that, unless you're pulling really high audiences, you need to reevaluate. And the second reason was I think we also became maybe a victim of the exchange rate at the time. It was a phenomenally expensive program to do. In total, I think there must have been over 100 people there or thereabouts involved in the actual production. Everything from the IT people to people setting the questions to a very complicated set. Lots of people involved in it. And I just think that that was probably a reason. And I think Anand made the right call. I was, to be perfectly honest with you, at the time, I was quite sad when it finished, maybe even a little bit bitter. But I think he made the right call. And it's the old Seinfeld factor, is that when you rather leave people wanting more. It's gone on to it's got longevity in other markets. I'm well aware of that, and I was absolutely delighted to see the Afrikaans version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I think recently on CakeNet. Looked at a couple of episodes, and I thought it was done very, very well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's on at the moment, I think, with Rian van Heerden, who's doing Wie Word Millionaire.
Very smart guy, and I think he does a brilliant job.
We're chatting to Jeremy Maggs. He's the former host of South Africa's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and also a very seasoned media personality. We're going to take a quick break and more with Jeremy and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire right after this.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour. Online, on air,
anywhere, anytime.
This is the Sandton Times Hour.
This is the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8, and we're chatting to Jeremy Maggs, the host of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in South Africa, and sort of going down memory lane. And Jeremy, I had the pleasure of actually visiting the Swiss and German set of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which is probably an exact carbon copy of the international format around the world, probably also the South Africa one. It's an incredibly impressive set. And I mean, being able to sit on the set every single week must have just been such an experience. I mean, I don't know if you got the full music and production values as we did with the final edit, or if it was a little bit disjointed, but it must have been quite something.
You know, Alex, one of the things that I do now is I do a lot of media consulting. And one of the things that I always teach people is never to lose your sense of wonder. And I think that often we do very exciting jobs. The job that you're doing right now, being behind a radio microphone with all the magic that goes with it, is a very exciting job. But I think sometimes we become a little inured to the magic. And I can tell you quite honestly and truthfully, when I was on that set, not a moment went by when I didn't walk into the middle and have a look around at those steep-lined bleachers, the numerous cameras, the crisscrossing lights, the almost opaque floor that they had, and I never lost my sense of wonder. When I was sitting in that hot seat and I heard the music and I looked at the people across me sweating profusely, not perspiring, sweating profusely as they tried to find the answer, and just the whole sense of gladiatorial drama that the show created, I never lost that. And the full import of what you experienced at home was exactly what I experienced on set. I will never forget it.
My gosh. I mean, that must have been quite something just to experience that. I mean, I don't know who was more stressed, you or the contestants. But Jeremy, what were some of the most memorable moments? I can't quite remember if we ever did give away R1 million.
Alex, I've been thinking about this very carefully, and it's a very unfair question, to be honest with you, because it was every show had memorable moments. To answer the first question, yes, we did. We gave away the prize once. It was at the end of the first season, and it was very dramatic. And the person walked away, answered the right question. Please don't ask me to remember his name or what the winning question was, because I simply cannot remember. But I do remember the look of absolute triumph on his face. And then, of course, the firing of the confetti gun and champagne appearing from nowhere. I had a floor manager, a guy called Brent Westerby, who remains a good friend of mine today. Great floor manager. He emerged with champagne. And it was an astonishing moment. But every single episode of that program, there was one little vignette, something that would happen, which would amaze, which would surprise, which would annoy, which would disappoint. Collectively, it was an astonishing experience. We had some amazing contestants with us, and the one thing that I learnt about the program was that all you needed to be successful on it was to be a reader. I have a huge issue with our reading quotient in South Africa. I don't think that we have a library culture, and I don't think that we have that inherent sense of curiosity. I do remember watching an interview with one of the big winners on the British version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and he was a lorry driver, and he won, I don't know, £32,000 or whatever it was. And they asked him afterwards, and they said, what was your secret of success? And he said, listen, mate, I read the papers every day. And I think that was the one thing that you needed. In fact, maybe there were two things. There was that, and maybe you also needed to have a little bit of an appetite for risk. But those are the two things. We need to read more in this country. I stand by that 100%.
Absolutely. No, I think that is a very good message to put out there. And I thought at one point that maybe the show had lost momentum because people were not really into general knowledge, or like you say, not into reading, and kind of struggled to maybe identify with the show, or maybe fully, take it all in. But Jeremy, was there anything that you didn't enjoy about the job? I mean, was there something that wasn't as great as it looked like on TV?
Well, Alex, I mean, I'm a big guy, so they could have made the suits a little bigger for me.
I know the feeling, Jeremy. I know the feeling.
There was nothing about it. I've thought about that, and I enjoyed the stress. I enjoyed the tension. I enjoyed, and Alex, let me open up here a little bit as well. If you're behind a radio microphone or a television camera, let's be quite honest. Broadcasters have two things in common. We love the sound of our own voices, and we do have very big egos. And I define anyone in this industry to disagree with me. So I'm going to be very honest with you. At the time, I enjoyed the attention. I enjoyed the adulation of some people. I enjoyed having my own dressing room.
Oh, the dressing room. Yeah, with your name on it as well.
Indeed.
Yeah. What are you doing right now? I mean, now that this has obviously passed a long time, we know we've seen you on news television. You've done a lot of sort of well-known television programs. But right now, what are you keeping yourself busy with?
Yeah. So Alex, I'm getting on a bit. So I left ENCA, the news channel, after 15 years or so. It was time for me to move on. I'm a great believer in one reinventing oneself, and I think that if you're able to, you should always try to find new challenges. So I'm doing a lot of media consulting work. I'm doing a lot of speech writing, and then I'm absolutely delighted to have joined MoneyWeb, and I'm doing a daily half-hour express news show between 12 and 12:30. It's called MoneyWeb at midday. And what I love about modern technology and modern media is that the moment the show is finished, it's repurposed instantly as a podcast. And I think that's the future of media as well.
Absolutely. Well, we're definitely on the same page on that one, Jeremy. Jeremy, if there's anything that remains with you, from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, something that you hope people took away from the show when it was on, in the early 2000s, what would that be?
That's a good question, Alex. The one thing which stays with me about the show, and I think you asked me right at the beginning of this conversation, why it was successful. I think the one thing which we don't have enough of in television is something which the guy who developed the program in the UK called shoutability. And the one thing that people, and you said to me that you used to sit back and enjoy it on a Sunday night. And I guarantee you that if you were sitting alone or even with your family, you would have shouted the answers out. And that was the way in which the show was designed. It was called shoutability. We wanted people to scream at the television set because they knew the answer and the person sitting in the hot seat didn't. And I just wonder if in entertainment television, I'm not going near news television because there's lots of shoutability there, but in entertainment television, whether we have enough shoutability. And I think that's the one thing I'll take away from that is that the person who comes up with another interactive show like that, where people are actively involved, particularly if you consider sit down as a family and do it, I think that that is the secret. I think we need more shoutability.
Well, there you have it. With his final answer in this interview, Jeremy Maggs, former host of South Africa's Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, thank you for joining me on the Sandton Times Hour. It's the bottom of the hour and time for a break with a bit of music and more of the Sandton Times Hour right after this.
Back for more?
The Sandton Times Hour continues.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 with Enzo and Smooth Operator. Bit of a remake on that old classic. Taking you into the second half of the Sandton Times Hour. And my name is Alexander Leipner. And if you listen to the show regularly, you know how this part of the show works. Because I remind you that if you heard something on the show that you thought was really interesting, that you really enjoyed, but you didn't get all the details, well, you can go onto the sandtontimes.co.za and have a look at the show notes. And we'll put all the details up there for you to look at when you've got time. As opposed to trying to write it down in the spur of the moment. Also, be sure to check out the social media accounts at Sandton Times, and you can also use the hashtag Sandton Times Hour. And don't forget to also send your questions, your comments, your feedback, your thoughts. All of those are welcome. Well, as we get on with our very special edition, chatting all things game shows of yesteryear, my next guest also became synonymous with our next game show. which was around the late 80s, early 90s, and it was called Treasure Hunt. And I think there was also an Afrikaans version of it, which was called Skattejag. But we're going to get all those details just now. And it was probably the original reality television show in South Africa. And, she's Melanie Walker. She joins me on the line. And Melanie, it's great to have you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Well, thanks for having me on your show. Why not, eh?
Well, Melanie, for those of us who can vaguely remember the elements and the mechanics that made up this particular show, I remember there being a helicopter, you strapped with a backpack and headphones and some sort of two-way radio communication device, and a couple of sorts in studio that had to figure out where you were or where you were going or where you had to go. Am I vaguely right?
That's pretty much about it, actually. You're spot on. I mean, we just flew around. It was so much more difficult in those days because, I mean, if you think about it these days, people can just go onto the internet. We didn't have that then. We didn't have Wi-Fi. We had to have an airplane flying above us with a repeater in it. So the signal from my backpack would bounce up through the helicopter to an airplane, which would then beam down to a base station and then get transferred into landlines all the way up to the studio in Johannesburg and then change somehow. I mean, it was magic. It was like this whole alchemy thing that was going on. Now it would be the simplest thing in the world to do.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty remarkable for its time. Like you were saying, there were no smartphones, there were no apps, there was no internet. I mean, it now looking at it, you think, well, that's pretty obvious. I mean, maybe the sound quality wasn't great because it was on a sort of a two-way radio system. But back then, I mean, it must have been revolutionary.
Oh, it was totally so. And books. We used to use books. Okay, we didn't have things that we could just go and type something in and find information. And most of the time, I mean, we were like, even though it was daytime, most of the time we were running around in the dark, and it was almost like the dark ages. I look at things now, and I just think, wow, how would we do the show now if we had to change it to kind of current times? Obviously, we'd need a helicopter. That's the most important thing.
But, I mean, these things must have been tremendously expensive to try and pull this all together. I mean, I didn't even know about the plane that was the relay just for the radio signal. But, I mean, just the helicopter alone. I mean, these days, if you want to get in a helicopter just for an hour, it costs a small fortune.
Yeah, I would imagine. I haven't been in a chopper for a while. I mean, every time a helicopter flies over, I'm standing there saying, come and fetch me. It was the most expensive show that was ever produced by the SABC. Probably even if you had to take it into today's money, it would probably still be the most expensive show ever done. But it was really worth it. And I mean, it's not just from South Africa. Of course, they did the original one in France with a guy. Then they did it in England with Annika Rice. They did another series with Annabelle Croft, who is a tennis player. They've done it all over. But then Scott, obviously, here doing it in Afrikaans, and then me doing it here. And I have heard that there's a rumor going around that they are wanting to bring Treasure Hunt in England back again with Annika Rice. And I'm thinking, well, you know what? If they can do it there, why should we not do it there? I still have the outfit and I still fit into it.
Well, that is tremendous. It's so funny you say that because I was chatting to Glenn Hicks and he was telling me, or we were chatting about how gladiators might be making a comeback as well. So it's quite remarkable how these shows of yesteryear might actually find a whole new audience with obviously a whole different set of technology. But Melanie, before you get onto the new edition of Treasure Hunt, how did you get onto the original edition of Treasure Hunt? How did that come about?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I couldn't even get an agent. I'd just come back from living in Ireland. I'd been modeling for years and I was very good friends with the cameraman of Skattejag, Colin Taylor. And he came to visit me when I was living in Ireland. And we sat there, we were watching the English version. And of course, I knew that he did Skattejag and I used to watch Skattejag the whole time. And he said, if you come back to South Africa, I should suggest to them that they do this in English with a girl, and I think you're the girl for it. So, of course, eventually I got back to South Africa. He suggested it to the producers. I couldn't get an agent, and he just said, just go to the audition. And I was up against a strong bunch of contenders, to be honest with you. And I just sat there and they said to me, why do you want to do this? And I said, because I want to be Scott, but I want to do it better.
Amazing. And I'm sure, listen, you must have had a tremendous amount of fans. I mean, just from some of the clips that I've seen and some of them that I still remember, it looked like a really fun show to be in. And I mean, to ask you, which was your most memorable episode, it almost feels like every episode must have been memorable.
They were. There were a couple. There was one that didn't actually make it on air because there was a corruption on the footage for some reason. which was possibly not a bad idea because it was we had to heat up the rotors of the helicopter with a hairdryer because it was the middle of winter, and I think we were in Frikwerstad, and the rotors just wouldn't turn. There was so much ice.
Wow.
So that was quite a dodgy one. But I think, honestly, my absolute favorite one would have to have been the last one that ever went out on air when we were down in Bredasdorp, of all places. And it just came together. It turned out that, and I didn't know, and he didn't know, obviously he knew that I was on the show, but it was somebody who I'd known for a very, very long time, was the contestant on the show. And I only found out when, we said hello. And I said, well, I'm not going to be helping him any harder. And it turned out to be just the most fun show. We were running around shearing sheep and chasing palominos. I mean, you have no idea. It was absolutely brilliant. But all of them, I mean, from the things that I had to do, saving damsels in distress on railway lines and hanging from the skids of the helicopter over 1,000-foot drop with no safety chains. They would not allow us to do that these days with safety measures in place. I tell you what, we were completely mad.
Well, thank goodness you didn't have social media back then, because I think it would have been an absolute...
Oh, thank goodness. I think anybody who was famous in the 80s or the early 90s are all saying... And we had this chat with a lot of the people at the old 5FM, the old presenters, saying, thank goodness there wasn't social media around in those days. We would have been in so much trouble.
So apart from it being a tremendous show, giving you great exposure, and I mean, like I said, I mean, the elements just make it sound like a really exciting, project to be part of. Was there anything that you didn't enjoy about the job? I mean, was there something that was just really stands out as being something that you wouldn't necessarily want to have to do again?
I know it's going to come as a surprise to a lot of people, but I'm kind of scared of heights. So a lot of the time, there were certain things I used to say to them, please don't make me do this. Okay, so if I was holding onto something, I was fine. But there were a couple of occasions when they made me climb off the skids of the helicopter and onto something really tall, and that kind of freaked me out. And the other one was putting me in with crocodiles, and they knew that I had an issue with crocodiles, so they did it to me 3 times. I mean, that's just the way it went, But on the whole, I tell you what, if they had to turn around and say to me right now, we want to do another season of Treasure Hunt, I would be in like Flynn. I would absolutely not even hesitate for 1 second. It was the best thing that anybody could possibly ever have done. It was the best show. Although my children, I've got a child looking at me at the moment saying, there's no ways. There's no ways because you need to be around to look after us. They watched one show once and they just said, how could you have done that? You could have been killed. And I'm like, no. It was like, we looked after everything very well. But it was the best job I've ever had and will ever have. Anything from there is nice, but it's kind of, sitting on the back burner. It's all fun doing the other stuff, but that was absolutely heaven. And you know what I think about so often now is that it's so easy to be somebody famous. And I'm using deeltekens around the word famous because there's so many different places that you can become a famous person. In those days, you had to be really good at what you were doing. You couldn't just get onto an internet radio station or become an influencer. You had to be really, really on your game to be able to do those jobs, whether it was a newsreader or running around playing games.
When you say really, really good, this also came with a certain level of training or skills that you had to acquire over a certain period of time. If you're saying, you were doing sort of stunt work or whatever, you couldn't just sort of have watched a couple of TikTok videos, done a bit of a crash course and then taken on a movie.
No. No, you think about it. I mean, the things that I used to do, I used to ride horses a lot. I was involved in martial arts. I was racing cars. So they took all of those skills that I had and threw it into the mix as well. So we made it a lot more exciting doing the game because I was doing most of those things professionally as well. These days, for people to be able to get to do those things is also a lot more difficult. And a lot of the time, people are just famous for being famous instead of being able to actually do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, one of the things that I also sort of thought about when I was kind of just recapping on this ahead of our interview was that it must have done a tremendous amount of work for South African tourism, because you guys spent quite a bit of time in very different parts of South Africa. Each episode was focused on a different area. Some areas that were probably not as well known as places like Cape Town or Durban or Johannesburg, the big hubs. And I mean, this must have really gotten people to start thinking about, wow, I should actually be going to, places like Uitenhage or, all the other smaller towns or secondary cities that people wouldn't have visited. And especially in a time where there wasn't the internet, there wasn't, things where you could just really have a look and see what, the Instagram posters of that particular lodge or that particular town. That must have been a big contributor to getting people to start looking at their own country.
Well, I still haven't finished actually going around the country, and I still have my copy of TV Bulletin, which was the guide to South Africa. Okay, that we kind of based everything off of that. All the information we needed was in there. And I've been working a lot with Viv Vermaak over the last few years. And of course, she was one of the presenters on Going Nowhere Slowly. And she and I sat there and you know what? Between the two of us, these two weird blonde chicks, we did more for South African tourism than anything else ever in this country. And why they haven't actually got us both back doing those things to push South Africa as a choice destination. And as you said, not just Cape Town, Durban and Joburg, okay, but to the little places. I mean, we're sitting there thinking, we need to go out and do that again. We need to go on another big road trip and just film it and bring it to the rest of the world, because there's so many amazing spots in South Africa.
Well, South Africa is certainly not a hard sell when it comes to travel and tourism. It just needs the right exposure. Melanie, is there anything that remains with you years after when you think back to those episodes that have kind of lingered with you?
Well, I'm still friends with all the people that are still around that I worked with, because don't forget, we had a very small little niche team. There were just 7 of us that traveled around. So it was a helicopter pilot and his assistant, the cameraman and his assistant, production coordinator, and the director and myself. And we had the 2 combis and a helicopter. So, of course, the A team went in the helicopter, but that used to change. So I wasn't always A team. Sometimes I wanted to be an A+1, which was one of the combis, because I wanted to drive around South Africa, not just fly around. So all of those trips that we went on, the shenanigans we got up to when we were going from place to place, because we'd go away for like 2 weeks at a time and shoot 3 or 4 or 5 programs. And we used to have just the absolute best time. I still have so many photographs and amazing memories, and people coming up to me every day and saying, "Aren't you that chick from the helicopter?" Every single time. But what's frustrating is that so many people misremember, that they think, "Yeah, weren't you on Scottyjag with Scott?" And I'm like, "No, Scott had his own show, and I did mine in English, and I did it better." Not wearing high heel shoes, though. Okay, so. But the memories of those times as well, that it was so exciting for people when we arrived in town with a helicopter, that even a couple of years later, I was just driving through Prince Albert up in the Cape, and I drove in there to go and get a milkshake. And this guy was looking at me really funny, and I'm like, "What?" And he says, "Are you here to shoot a program?" And I'm like, "No, why?" He says, "Well, the first time ever a helicopter arrived and landed here this morning, and then you've walked in, and it just happened to be serendipity." It was weird, but people have not forgotten it. Every single week of my life, there's somebody asking me about the show.
Well, that's incredible. And that just shows you a good show is hard forgotten and long remembered. And Melanie Walker is one of those presenters hosting Treasure Hunt in South Africa, late 80s, early 90s. You might still remember it. If you do, I'd love to hear from you, and it'd be good to have you share some of your memories. Melanie, thank you for making the time to be on the Sandton Times Hour. We're going to take a quick musical break and more of the hour right after this.
Connect with the Sandton Times. Email editor@sandtontimes.co.za.
It's a Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and Mikasa with Heavenly Scent, taking you into the last 100-meter dash of this week's hour. And we've been having some fascinating conversations with some of the great game show hosts of yesteryear on this show. And I've got one more lined up for you. And just to give you a little bit of hint, here's a little bit of a sound clip just to refresh your memory and just to moisten those memory banks.
You need 3 moves, 2 or 3 questions for you, Bruce, on measuring instruments. 2 or 3.
2, please, Martin.
Which of those is an instrument for measuring distance in a wheeled vehicle?
Odometer.
Which of those is an instrument for measuring time?
Chronometer.
Is right. You've got the 2 moves. Well done.
Number 3 is? You've got a TV and a refrigerator. Let's see what's on number 3.
Ah, the booby traps are there. Brenda, historic cities. 2 or 3.
2, please.
Which ancient city is associated with a fabled huge wooden horse?
Troy.
Which city was the capital of Egypt when Cleopatra was queen?
Alexandria.
You've got the moves. Well done.
Charlotte's going on our bicycle. Okay, press it. All thumbs. And it is 2 pool lounges worth 1,500 rand. Bank or move?
Well, you have it. It's Martin Bailie, the former host of a show called Tele Fun Quiz. And Martin Bailie joined me all the way from England. Good to chat to you.
Lovely to speak to you, Alexander. Do you remember the show yourself?
Martin, I must tell you, it was one of my regular views. And I mean, being of that age, and I'm trying to figure out what age I was, but I know this was sort of like early 90s. I mean, who didn't want a Telefun quiz duck or a telequack?
Yep, absolutely.
Do you still have one?
I do. I have two. I have telequackling and telequack, so I've got both of them. As with most things, it's in a box somewhere.
Let me tell you, I think those things might become collector's items and might go for quite a bit of money at some point.
Well, I doubt it very much. There was also a board game called Tele Fun Quiz. I don't know if you're aware of that.
No.
And I've got a copy of that as well. Yeah, I think you can get one online for a few bucks.
Oh, wow. Well, I must check that out. But let's go back to the beginning here, Martin. How did you end up getting onto this show?
Well, the show was a creation of Jenny Lister and Tina Cook. They were the producers of the show. I had been on Radio 5 for a while. I'd done some bits and pieces. Of course, I had been on Video 2, and there were other programs like No Jacket Required and that kind of thing that I did guest presentation, antenna, and all kinds of stuff. But I did want to do a show, a regular show. And so I dressed up in the most outrageous outfit, including black ballet pumps, leggings, and a purple cloak, and went to see the head of television to ask him, why aren't you using me on TV on my own show? And shortly after that, Tina Cook and Jenny Lister contacted me and said, would you be interested in doing a game show? So I went round to their home, which was just around the corner from the SABC. And we sat down, we had a chat and met some people. And the next thing I know, we're into the first series of, I think there were 11 series or thereabouts.
That's remarkable. 11. I don't even remember it was 11, but I mean, that's quite a good run. And you always had two co-hosts. I definitely remember the one, Eddie Eckstein. He was your one.
I wish I could. I'm going to be so embarrassed by this, but I can't remember them all. But Sue Kelly Christie was obviously one of the presenters as well. Tumi Mohabo, who went on to great things. She was one of the wafters, co-presenters, assistants. But really, it was a lovely bunch of people. It really was. I think there were at least 3 guys who went through it all together, and probably 4 ladies. But the years and the memory. So.
Yeah. And I mean, it was a very different time. I mean, if you watch some of these episodes now, the technology on its own was just spectacular. I mean, it was sort of these box TVs with a button, and I don't even want to know what had to happen in the background for all those things to sync up and seem seamless on television. But then also the prizes. I mean, the prizes were just spectacular. I mean, I don't even know what it was. Sort of like food heaters and microwaves and things that were at the time cutting edge. And now you look at it and you go, my goodness, that's just it's just another lifetime ago.
Computers were given away and Persian carpets. But the big thing, of course, was the cash bonus, which could be up to, if not more than 100,000 rand, which in those days was a huge sum of money. You know, you could have gone out and bought yourself half a house for 100,000 rand. It was a lot of dough.
Unbelievable. I mean, what are some of your most memorable episodes that you did when you did Tele Fun Quiz?
Oh, gosh. Now you see, you put me on the spot. I suppose some of the most memorable episodes are the Christmas specials with various celebrities, because they were always just so funny. They wanted to come on and play for fun, but they didn't. They seriously played Tele Fun Quiz. They wanted to win, and they always wanted to win, and they were great fun to do. But I think when we went out and took the show traveling, because we took the show to Durban and we took the show to Cape Town, and we would go to Stellenbosch, and there'd be a theatre there, and we would record Tele Fun Quiz there. And it was absolutely great to get out amongst the people who watched it on a regular basis. And I think that's why the show was so successful, was that the connection was there between the program and the people.
Martin, how successful was this show? I mean, if you had to go look back at the time, I mean, be it for your own profile, be it the amount of people that come up to you and say, listen, I want to be on the show. What do I need to do? Give me a bit of a sense.
Well, there were 2 programs at the time that probably vied for the title of your favorite quiz show on TV, Nuit for Nuit, which I think in some form or other ran for many more years than we actually did, and Tele Fun Quiz. And Tele Fun Quiz was possibly the most popular English language TV quiz at the time. You know, programs came on afterwards, and Tele Fun Quiz in itself was a bit of a lift of a TV show that had been running in the UK. But after that, programs that were done on TV game shows, including Small Talk, which I did for a couple of years as well.
Yeah, yes.
They were just South African versions of other countries' great game shows. You know, Nuit for Nuit was of its own, and Tele Fun Quiz to some extent was as well, although there was a program in the UK called Strike It Lucky.
How was that? Anything that you didn't enjoy about the job? Was there anything that was particularly painful that you had to go through when it came to doing this kind of work?
I have to be honest with you, and I've said this for years, I'm a backstreets of Belfast boy who left school at the age of just short of 16 with 3 O levels, which is slightly less than matric. And I have had the luckiest life, really, because I've done what I wanted to do. Because my teachers always asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be on radio and TV. And I kept thinking, this is never going to happen. And eventually it did. And I lived my dream. And I've been very, very lucky.
And that's very few people in media who can honestly say that, especially with the career that you've had. What are you doing now? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people wondering, what happened to Martin Bailie? Where is he in the world?
Well, we came back to the UK in 2002. My wife finished a doctorate at Exeter University. She's a clinical psychologist. Our daughter, in fact, is just finished her dissertation as a PhD in chemistry, biological chemistry at Edinburgh University.
Wow.
But she was the right age to start in British education. So that was one of the reasons why we came over. And for 20 years, I worked on the BBC in Cornwall, which is where I'm speaking to you from, North Cornwall. A lovely radio station, really great. And when I turned the age of 60, I took redundancy from the BBC and said, thank you very much indeed. And for 3 months, I thought, that's it. I don't ever have to work again. And well, I suppose, you know, you're lucky in the UK, you get your pension and all the rest of it. If you've been frugal, you don't have to work again. But my wife was furious. She said, get out of the house. You're a pain in the tush, she said. Go and find yourself something to do. And that evening, we were sitting watching television and she was scrolling through Facebook on her phone and came across an advert for our doctors. So what happens here is you either go to the doctor to pick up your prescription, or you get your prescription and take it to a chemist, or alternatively, your prescription is filled in by the doctor and delivered to a small local shop or a community center, and you go and pick up your medicine from there. And I have a job, very important job, 3 hours every morning. I drive my little black van and I go from community center to community center and I drop off all these medicines that people pick up. And so that's what I do. I've just finished a series on internet radio, station called Slice Audio. But the time I spent was just huge, and it meant I didn't have as much time to spend in the garden.
Well, Martin, I feel like I've got a tune coming on, like Postman Pat, where you sort of dropping
it's a bit like that.
Dropping off this medicine.
Because shortly after I started, I got my dog, Max, who will probably come round now that I've mentioned his name. He's a working Cocker Spaniel. And he used to go round in the van with me, but he got a little bit car sick. So he doesn't go out so often. But you would see us driving along, me in the driver's seat, him in the passenger seat with a restrainer on. And he would sit up very proud in his van. But as I say, I don't think he's taken to it particularly well.
Martin, I mean, anything that you hope that people took away from those times when you hosted the show? I mean, was there any sort of particular feeling that you wanted to sort of impart with people when they watched this every single week?
I think it was something that then led on to, I was involved in Peace Radio at the time of the first democratic elections. And that was that what we tried to do with the show was to say, it doesn't matter who you are or what you are, you can have fun together. If you mix together, get to know each other. And I think it was Martin Luther King said, the greatest thing that we fear is not knowing the other. Just, there being somebody else and not knowing enough about them, get to know people better. And that was a nice thing, I think, that the program did. But I don't think there was a huge message in the program other than turn on the telly.
Absolutely. Well, Martin Bailie, I thank you for joining me. And I was going to say I will be back in a whiz on Tele Fun Quiz, but we're not going to be back in a whiz. But I thank you so much for making the time to be on the Sandton Times Hour. And it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you.
Well, thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it.
And that's it for another Sandton Times Hour on Mixed 93.8, a very special one that you can listen to once more if you want to, or share with friends on any good podcast platform. If you want to get in touch, you can email edit@sandtontimes.co.za. You can connect on social media @Sandton Times, or visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za for more. And also feel free to send through your questions, your comments, your feedback. All of that is welcome. Thank you to all the incredible masters of the game shows that spent time with me over this week and previous weeks. And Vincenzo, thank you as always for being part of this and doing what you do so well. And thank you to the Sandton Times team as well as everyone on Mix 93.8. And thank you to you for listening. And let's connect again next week.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the Sandton Times Hour. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to share it.